The U.S. Senate will be unveiling its draft health care bill later today. The Republicans have been working on legislation aimed at repealing and replacing major portions of the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare. According to the Washington Post, the draft bill will be largely similar to the House version and would repeal most of the taxes that pay for Obamacare and roll back the Medicaid expansion. Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel is the chair of the Department of Medical Ethics and Health Policy at the University of Pennsylvania, also the chief Obamacare architect and the current advisor to President Trump's health care reform, and joins us from the Penn Wharton China Center in Beijing. Dr. Emanuel, it's a pleasure meeting this, catching up with you again and talking. First of all, I got to say something. You know, we talked during the, when you were in the Obama administration. I find it hard to believe that you've been meeting multiple times with President Trump trying to help him fix whatever needs fixing in his term. I mean, if that is not magnanimous, I don't know what is.
Well, Bernie, let me clarify something. First of all, I haven't met with them since the end of March, right before the failure of the first House bill. They have not consulted me over the last 3 months, really. So I would not describe myself as an advisor. I did meet with President Trump 3 times. I do not endorse the outlines of the House bill at all. I don't endorse the outlines of what we're hearing about the Senate bill, but we should remind your viewers that we know very little about the Senate bill. It's all done in secret. There's been no hearings. There's been none of the what we call usual order in the United States. And this Mitch McConnell said that he found the Affordable Care Act passed much too quickly without usual hearings. This has been 0 hearings, no public discussion, and he actually wants to have a vote within about 10 days. Not enough time to really consider this with any due deliberation, and that's on something that will transform 18% of the U.S. GDP. That seems hasty, to say the least.
Yeah, well, let's face it. I mean, I think it would be fair to say that a fair majority of American people are very confused about what the heck is going on. I mean, the first thing that Mr. Trump tried to tackle was health care, and we saw what happened with that. I mean, that was basically a civil war within the GOP. I mean, even members of the Republicans are aghast at the possibility that more than 20 million people with a repeal could be caught without coverage. You know, what does this mean? We got to keep what's in place, or there are ways to fix it? You've been one of the first people to say that, you know, the ACA is not a perfect animal and that there are ways to improve it. Okay, Dr. Emanuel, the line broke down a little bit there, technical issues there. Why don't we go back to Mr. Trump in Iowa at his rally. Listen in a bit while we try to fix that line and reestablish. All right, we are back on the line finally after establishing contact with Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, chair of the Department of Medical Ethics and Health Policy, University of Pennsylvania. Doctor, thank you very much for your patience and staying around. I know you're a busy man, and it's very kind of you to stick around to continue this conversation. Okay, so we set the parameters. They haven't talked to you since that failed vote. They have another vote that's coming up. What's going to happen next to this? I mean, something is going to be done. We don't know what it is. There are problems with exchanges in several of the states, and we know that. We know, and you know better than anybody, that Obamacare ACA is not a perfect animal. It needs fixes. It needs tweaks. What are those going to be?
Well, let me remind you that even Hillary Clinton agreed that reform was necessary. But reform is different than repeal, and it's much different than throwing 23 million people off of insurance and off of Medicaid, as the Republican plan appears to be doing. For one thing, to stabilize the exchanges doesn't require rocket science. It means enforcing the mandate, giving the reinsurance and risk corridors back to the insurance company, something that Senator Marco Rubio took away, guaranteeing people get subsidies for the cost sharing, that is for the deductibles and copays. Those 3 things, along with an advertising campaign targeted at young people, would go a long way to stabilizing the markets. The problem is a lot of this uncertainty makes insurance companies nervous, and when insurance companies are nervous, they do two things. They exit markets and they raise premiums, and that's exactly what you're seeing. That uncertainty was created by the Republicans. It didn't exist under President Obama, and the Republicans are going to hold the bag for a lot of people losing insurance, and they will blame this administration. As I said, there are other reforms to be made. One of the important things I think you, Bernie, and I agree on is we need cost control. Affordability is one of the big issues in the American healthcare system. This bill does nothing about affordability, and that's the shock. I mean, if you had started with affordability, there would have been a consensus between Republicans and Democrats to start with rolling back the Affordable Care Act and throwing 23 million people off of insurance does not seem a sensible way to make progress.
Doctor, you are my ideological bosom buddy here on the cost control issue. This is the thing, you know, the plan obviously, you know, addresses insurability and coverage, but the annoying things, the little things that add up that make the U.S. health care untenable, like the ridiculous costs of medications, the way the U.S. pharma industry is able to manipulate patents, you know, buy up companies that they don't own, that they didn't innovate anything, and then start raising prices. That's got to end somehow, right? I mean, even President Trump knows there's something wrong there. I don't know if he's got a plan to fix it. He's talked about importing drugs from Canada. Talk about this. What can we do about problems like this?
So, Bernie, you're absolutely right. The patent system and the FDA marketing exclusivity to drug companies gives them an effective monopoly. And then we say to monopoly people, set the prices, and they're going to do what monopolies do when they set prices. They're going to make them sky high. This is another area, as you point out, that there's bipartisan agreement that we need to control drug prices. And there's some reasonable, I think, agreement on what that might look like. You place a maximum price on the drugs. You allow the price to reflect the health benefits. So if a drug is really beneficial, say cures an infection or cures cancer, you allow it a high price, and if it doesn't, if it sort of might prolong life for a few weeks or a few months, it has a lower price. That's the kind of understanding most Americans think is reasonable. And again, I thought that this was a place of agreement. This is a place you might start on drug pricing. The president, as you point out, Bernie, was is very agitated about this, and yet the Republicans didn't begin there, which is very, very surprising. It was a place where we could have gotten a landmark agreement and a lot of consensus.
Right. Doctor, I hope the president gets on the horn and calls you real soon because he needs some really good advice. Good talking to you, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel.